We're into week 7, and I'm excited because I've spent some part of the last 3 years going to factories in China. You already know that, but the one thing that they need a lot of help with is in the quality control. And this week is all about quality, so that gets me excited, rather than just read the textbook and say, wow, I love the textbook. No, I actually see it in the factories. They need a lot of help. So just a quick 30-second overview. Last week, I introduced you to this notion of the balanced scorecard. And there were 3 big ideas that we covered in the first part of the week, and one fourth idea in the latter half. The first of those 3 big ideas was we need to understand what a strategy is, a way that company acts in order that feels that will be successful. And I showed you 2 factories from China that they had different approaches to making money. One just made lots of USBs and sold them to gift agencies and corporates, and it didn't matter if the quality was there because you'd never ever complain if you get a bad gift. There was another factory that just made huge amounts of inventory. So the factories have different strategies. Companies have different strategies, and so a strategy is your model of how you're going to be successful. That's all. And that was the first thing we introduced last week. And then I briefly touched on this notion of re-engineering, and that was all about thinking about how can we change processes in the organization. Change processes so that we can do things faster, that we can do things cheaper, okay, that we can do things that are more sustainable in the long term. And that is a very important concept we're going to come back to next week also. And then I introduced you to the balanced scorecard. And the balanced scorecard was more of a formal approach to try to map strategy, a formal approach. So a strategy, you have all gone out and spoke to business people now, part of your project. And if you ask them, they go, a balanced scorecard, what do they say? No, we don't have a balanced scorecard, right? Did you ask them that? Have you, put your hand up if you've actually spoken to the business people for your project so far. Some of you have. Okay, do they know about the balanced scorecard? No, they don't, all right? But that doesn't have to be in your conversation, all right? You're not interviewing them about what knowledge they have about the scorecard, all right? That scorecard is something in your mind. It's more of a framework to think about different aspects of the business. So you can ask them about different aspects of the business, and then you take what they tell you and then you put it into the scorecard. Are you with me here? All right? So don't expect business people to know all of these frameworks. If they're interested, you can share with them, that's great. I'm sure they'll be interested to see the project that you finish. I would expect that you actually give them a copy when you finish of the project. You want to help them, okay? Don't just take, you want to give too. So the balanced scorecard was, we're thinking about the business model in terms of 4 perspectives. So we've got the financial, you're all doing accounting, so we love our financial perspective accounting, yes. All right, then we have the customer, and no business can survive without a customer. And then we have the internal processes, and what was the final one? What was the one at the bottom? Hello? Learning and growth. Okay, so that was more the renewal, that was the training, that was the creating capability, that was selecting the right people, that is having the right culture, that is having just the way you do things so people's capability improves, so teamwork improves, so we're able to do the internal processes better. Okay, so the learning and growth is all about how do we build and how do we renew and how do we improve the capability, whether that's the human resources, whether that's the information system in the organisation. But the actual delivering of value is actually the internal processes. And who judges whether you deliver value or not? It's the customer. And if the customer thinks you're adding value, then what happens? You make money. So the thing that the big takeaway from last week is that the parts you have most control over is the learning and growth and the processes. You don't have control over the customer, okay? Unless you have lots and lots of money and you can do lots and lots of advertising to create a perception about your product that really isn't there. But at the end of the day, the customer will use your product, and word of mouth with social media is 10 times stronger than it was 10 years ago. But in the past, you just flood the advertising on the TV and then the customers come, all right? That, in some ways, in the past, you have control over the customer. But today, no, not as much. You have more control over the learning and growth and internal processes. Okay, so let's, the final thing we covered last week was, well, maybe is what we started last week was, okay, that was a balanced scorecard, but now we want to look at individual processes. So we want to, let's have a look at the first perspective, financial perspective. So on Thursday, what did we look at? We looked at how do we actually formalize all of the numbers in the profit and loss and the balance sheet for the period into some ratios. So we had a price ratio, we had a productivity ratio, we had growth ratios. And the big idea on Thursday was that if your strategy is one of cost leadership, then you're looking for improvements in the growth ratio and the price ratio. No, you're looking for improvements in the growth ratio and the productivity ratio. But if your strategy is focusing on product differentiation, then you're looking for improvements in the growth ratio and the price ratios. Okay? So you want margin expansion. You want that to be continuing on. All right, so that was a revision of last week. And just another note, if anything is on the exam, it is learning objective 4, and that's all, okay? We have it on video now, so you're safe. Okay, all right. So that was the big picture, and in some ways, chapter 19 is what we're covering today, is going to focus more on the systems thinking and measurement. Chapter 12 is what we covered last week, and that focuses more on the accounting, so the ratios like we talked about last week. Now, do you all have the PowerPoint slides? Yes? Good. Okay, I'm glad. All right, so big picture, remembering, at the end of the day, whatever we do, we're playing around with information. As accountants, we play with information. We aggregate it, we put it into reports. Those reports are useless if they are not being used to make decisions. And so what I introduced you to last week was we want to focus on the decisions that are made by CEOs, CFOs, and CIOs. It's very important that, and I can have the pointer here, yes, in order to get their attention, it's more likely you get their attention with financial measures, not with non-financial measures. So the great thing about today is we're going to learn how to put things that are happening here into financial measures. Can we do that? Yes, we can, with a quality report. And so when we get it into a financial measure, then we can go to the CFO, the CIO, and say, look, we need a new machine on the factory floor. We've looked at 2 machines, machine A, machine B. Machine A, this is the scenario that will happen if we invest. Here's the scenario if we invest in machine B. My recommendation is we go with machine A. And then the CFO will say, that sounds good, here are the numbers. Okay, all right, check, sign it off, boom. Okay, that's the whole process, all right? See, today is about, is there any reports that we can create to convince these C managers to give us money for initiatives at the process level? All right, that is the why we are doing chapter 19. Okay, all right, so notice in chapter 19, I think there are 7 or 8 learning objectives. Okay, in another year, I would actually spend I would spend half on quality and half on time. We may not get into all of this. This is not a critical part. It will not be a focus of the exam, okay? So we're focusing on the learning objectives 1, 2, 3, 4. Ovlen, is that right? Your tutorials? The tutorial exercises are focusing on 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, are we all clear on that? Okay, good, good, good. Okay, all right. Okay, so why quality and time? Actually, I'd love to teach you. I'll give you a brief overview of time later if we have time. All right, because it is so critical. There's 2 main ways that we can compete. We can compete in terms of quality. We can compete in terms of time. All right. Okay. First of all, I'm going to show you in a minute attributes of quality. That is design and conformance quality. And also, I'm going to show you. We're going to talk about drivers of quality, okay? So design and conformance quality is all about thinking about who is your customer and what does your customer want, okay? Who is your customer? What does your customer want? And so one of these is in the mind of the customer. One of these is in the mind of the engineer, the person that actually creates the product, okay? So we're going to come back to this. Underline design and conformance quality, okay? We're going to come to this shortly, okay? So conformance is all about, does the product fit the engineering standards that you have set for that product, okay? Okay, so when you go buy a car and the car is rated to go up to 200 kilometres an hour, can it go 200 kilometres an hour? Okay, now the customer may never drive it at 200 kilometres an hour. So sometimes the customer will never know whether the product can meet the conformance standards. Are you with me here? All right. However, the customer is the judge of the design standards. Okay, so whether the seats are comfortable, okay, it's in the mind of the customer. They just sit in it. Oh, I don't feel comfortable here. But the engineer will look at the seat and find, oh, it has 60% springing power in the seats. Okay, and so you can engineer the conformance quality of anything in the product, but the customer won't know all those specifications. So when we talk about engineering specifications for the performance of a product, then we're talking about conformance, okay? Does the product conform with the specifications? And most of those specifications customers don't even know about. When you buy something, and it comes with instructions, right? When you buy a new product, you buy a new phone, you buy a new computer, you buy something, it's got instructions. How many of you look at those instructions to look at the specifications? Anyone? You don't, do you, right? And even if you do, right, how many of you could actually measure any of those specifications? Like, you know, your phone has a 0.3 watt amp speaker inside. How would you know? How would you measure that? You don't know. But companies measure that to see if that product conforms to their standard. But the design is what you see. The customer sees the design of the product. So there's your design and there is your conformance. Okay, so that's the first big idea I want you to take away. Now, we're going to go into the later part of this hour and then I'm going to show explain to you the difference between prevention, appraisal, internal failure and external failure. When you know that, you will be able to get all of the costs that are in your accounting statements and put it under each of these areas, and then we can make a report. And the great thing about this report that you're going to generate is that it kind of has a causality to it. In other words, prevention is near at the beginning of the production stage. You with me here? All right? Whereas external failure, guess where that is? That is at the end, okay? And that is at the end, and that is in the customer's hands where it fails. Internal failure is when the auditor in the factory tests the product and then it fails. And then appraisal is where you may be actually checking different parts along the assembly line, okay? And then prevention are steps and standard operating procedures you put in place to actually minimize any effort here and minimizing here and here. So I'm going to show you a video today in a factory where we actually have a rating form that shows a lot of internal failure. And some of that form explains that, well, some of the internal failure happened in receiving inspection. And so if they spent more money here, then they would actually incur less money here. And the whole idea is that if you invest $1 here, you might save $2 here, you may save $10 here. Why might you save $10 here and just $2 here? Why? What's the big difference between internal and external? What do you think? The big difference is if the product fails in the customer's hands, then maybe the product may tell the customers may tell other customers, potential customers, oh, don't buy this product. They may make a video and put it on YouTube, don't buy this product, okay? You understand here, all right? So a $2 investment here may save a $10 investment here. You got the idea here. A 50-cent investment here may save a $10 investment here. So that's the whole idea, okay? That's where we're going today. Basically, that's today's lecture in a nutshell. All right? That's a big idea for today. All right, now CS1000, that's a website I created about 8 years ago. I call it China Supply 1000. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you two factories. You haven't seen these before. And your job is you need to tell me, okay, you need to tell me which factory is the good one and which one is the bad one. You with me here? Okay. All right. All right. And I've got a nice surprise for you at the end. So let's run this. I think they work. Okay. So we've got two they both make smartwatches, by the way. Okay. Smartwatch you put on your wrist. Okay. And so we're just going through into the storeroom here. We're just being introduced into the factory here, the storeroom over here. And soon we'll go into the assembly line. So when we go into the assembly line, I just want to show you some aspects of the assembly, because when we come back and we start talking about prevention and appraisal, then we can use this as examples, okay? So now, here's the assembly line of factory 1. There is that thing that was dangling down, that was an anti-static wire, and it wasn't on the worker, it was just hanging there. It should be on all workers working with electrical components. All right, and so here we have, they're doing the smartwatch here, and we have lots of instructions along the top. Instructions at the top here, but they're missing down here. Notice there's no instructions for these workers down here. See that? But every workplace here has detailed instructions for, this is a standard operating procedure. And so what is very important, what you call this, these are prevention activities. When you have a standard operating procedure above the worker, that's called a prevention activity, because you are making sure that the workers follow these steps. If they follow these steps, then it's likely there's going to be no internal failure or external failure. Okay. So when I went to the end here, this lady at the end didn't have gloves on her fingers, and so therefore the moisture from her hands goes onto the product, and that moisture can collect dust, and then that dust can become problematic for an electrical item, okay, especially if you're trying to work in dust-free zones, okay. Notice all soldering people, they must have something on their wrist. I don't know if this person has. I think maybe on this hand he has. Okay, this lady here does not have gloves on her fingers, and she should be having gloves on her fingers, because now she's putting the final product together, so you don't want fingerprints on that final product. All right, see the wristband here? That is to stop electrical static going onto the electrical item here from your body. Your body produces a lot of static electricity. And these are very... So what I'm showing you, I'm not here to teach you, this is not an engineering class where I show you how to run a factory. I just want to show you examples of prevention activities, okay? These are things that you must do at a minimum when you're having a factory, okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do now is, which factory do you think is the better factory? Okay, which one do you think is the better one? They both make smartwatches. They got uniforms on this one here. They got uniforms, nice hat, everything. Okay, even they make me put on a uniform when I go visit the factory. All right, so hands up for the top one. 1, 2, 3, 4, just 4 of you. 5, anyone else? Hands up for the bottom one. So why do you say the bottom one? Why did you say the bottom one? Come on, quick. Yes? Come on, why the bottom one? Because? Yeah? Why would you say the bottom one or top one? What would you say? This one has lots of instructions. Okay, that's a good point. Good. Who put their hand up for the top one? Okay, so the top factory is, it looks good. Everyone's got their uniform on. And I've given you a hint. See these instructions here? This is what you call, these are prevention activities. These are prevention activities. Prevention, in other words, you are, if the person that works at this workstation has to do step 1, then step 2, then step 3, and everything is laid out. They cannot do step 2.5. They've got to do step 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And it's very, very clear. This is what you call prevention activities. And so this factory here did not invest in as much prevention activities. By the way, this factory is gone. Gone! Closed. 3 months after I left it. All right? Now, so I did some more investigation, and I did some more, let's go to the next. I did some more investigation. Here are the two, by the way, these are the 2 factories. Okay, and so this lady comes out, this is the top factory, and smartwatches in a crate. Look at this, all lined up. Nothing protecting them in between. Like, that's the smartwatch you're going to buy. And they brought it out of the administration area. Why did they do that? Oh, they had to take it into another area of the factory because they had to test the Bluetooth, and the Bluetooth interfered with the other wireless transmitting devices on the assembly line. But they take it out of the dust-free zone into the dust area to test the Bluetooth. So that's a big no-no of any factory working with electrical products. Again, failure of prevention activities here. Everything is done all in the same dust-free zone in this one here. Okay, now notice here there's a QC form. See that? QC form? All right, and that's the workers have to make notes on QC form, and then they have to follow every step of these procedures here. Okay, so you've got some idea now of what do we mean by prevention activities. A prevention activity is not necessarily a lock or a key. It could be a clear standard operating procedure that workers have to follow. All right, so this one is closed up, and because I spoke to the owner of this factory a few months later and he said, oh, it doesn't matter, we ended up outsourcing to another factory anyway. Why is this factory able to keep going, or why did it seem to have more prevention activities? Because this factory, I investigated further, actually did OEM manufacturing for Sharp. You all know Sharp? And they did OEM manufacturing for Sharp that made set-top boxes. And guess what? If you do an OEM factory for a Japanese brand, you can bet your bottom dollar the Japanese has visited that factory, inspected the factory to make sure that prevention activities are there, and making sure that the factory is up to speed. Otherwise, the Japanese will never touch it. Okay? That's a fact. All right? So once I found out they were OEM manufacturer for Sharp, oh, wow. I didn't even have to see the assembly line. I knew that they were going to be good. Okay? This one here, no. All right. So there you go. Enough. I was just introducing you to prevention activities, okay? Remember, the cost of the quality report is prevention, then there's appraisal, then internal failure, and then external failure. You with me here, okay? So I could read out the definition in the book, what prevention activities are, but I wanted to show you firsthand what do we mean by prevention activities, okay? What do we mean by appraisal? Appraisal is something like when you get an inspector to come into the factory and they will inspect different stages of the production process. Okay, so it's a human that comes in. Now the company itself, the factory itself, may have inspectors in the factory, and they will inspect. All right. So I'll give you an example. How many of you have got an iPhone? Okay. So one of my good friends used to work for Apple in the Foxconn factory in China, and they had, at one stage, they had 15 assembly lines. They normally have, Apple has one inspector, like Apple employ an inspector in Foxconn to monitor the 15 assembly lines. Anyway, there was this one day about 7 years ago, I think China Unicom, one of their big customers, found one of the screws missing. One of the screws missing in the iPhone. The very next day, Apple suddenly had 15 inspectors, one for each assembly line, making sure that this incident never ever happens again. All right? And so they were there to inspect, but also just to really understand what went wrong. And so Apple was very, very critical on that. That's why when you buy your iPhone, you know it's going to work, okay? Design, right? Design quality. Are you with me here? Okay? All right. So these are all different areas. If you go and ask Asia Quality Focus to come and do inspection in your factory, they'll say, oh, what would you like us to inspect? And when will you like us to come and inspect? Will you like us to come and inspect at the beginning, or in the middle, or at the end? I don't know. Just come and inspect the product, please. Okay. All right. So inspection happens at the ordering stage. I've actually gone into factories and done audits for factories. I've actually done a factory audit where a client contacts me from USA and they say, "Oh, Connor, I've got these 2 factories, can you come and visit and then tell me which factory I should buy from?" Okay, exciting stuff. Okay, and so there's inspection that can occur at the start of production, right through production, or at the end of production. So the whole process here, there can be various stages of inspection. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about appraisal. Appraisal, okay? Appraisal is when you're actually checking that things are done as they should be done, okay? Prevention is actually setting up all the procedures to make sure that things are done as they are done. Okay? All right. Now, is this a bird or a dog? Because this is what happens if we don't have inspection, we don't have prevention, okay? If we don't have a prevention, we don't have appraisal, something like this might occur. And it's maybe it's only the customer that finds out that it's like this. The company may not know. At the end of the day, it's the customer's choice. My friend he did some work for a teddy bear factory, and they make teddy bears. And so with teddy bears, they do a lot of sewing, and there's a lot of, did you know that in factories they have scores, if not hundreds, of sewing machines in the factory. And so they're always breaking needles. And so, you know, can you imagine a needle being left in a teddy bear? And you went, touch it, cuddle it, and there's a needle in there, or you put it near your face and it, right? Well, this actually happened. My friend's factory, because this is the activity for going through and making the teddy bear, okay? So that's kind of like the process, right? So near the stage of, we've got cut and then sewing, just before the dressing and packaging, this factory was in the process of closing and moving to another province, because in Shenzhen, the wages keep on going higher and higher and higher, so factories are closing and moving, all right? So this factory is in the process of moving. So what it did was it actually outsourced the sewing and dressing to another company. So it took all these bears and sent it to the other company, and then the company brought the bears back, and then they packed them up and shipped them out. Well, what happened is, normally in a factory, when they're making stuff like this, they will have a metal detector at the end of the assembly line. Why do you think they have that? Just to detect needles. That's all. All right? Right? So what happened is they took the semi-finished bears before it got to the metal detector, packaged them up, sent it off to the other factory, because this factory is sort of closing up and everything. So when the shipment came back, they didn't put it through the metal detector. Okay. And fortunately, the owner of the factory found a needle in one of the bears, and they were able to go back and get that shipment and stop it from going, okay? So in other words, they detected an internal failure, luckily, all right, before it became an external failure, like a needle in the eye of a child. You understand here? This is very critical stuff. So, all right, so I'm telling you stories. But remember, what is our theme today? We want to understand costs in terms of prevention, appraisal, internal failure, and external failure. So now I hope you're starting to get a picture of, wow, you know, there's 4 different types of costs here. Okay? All right, so we want to compete on quality. All right, so, oh, what's happening? Okay, we want to, first of all, we need to define it, and then we need to measure it, okay? So we got design and conformance. Remember, right at the start, design and conformance. Now, which one of these, we're going to come to this, let's have a look. Okay, quality is a competitive tool. The total features and characteristics of a product or a service made or performed according to specifications to satisfy customers at the time of purchase and during use. Okay, so at the end of the day, the customer is the ultimate judge of quality. Quality focus reduces costs and increases customer satisfaction. It was interesting, up until the 80s, the general thinking about quality was quality costs money. If we want to save costs, then if we want to reduce costs, our quality will go up. But then the Japanese came along and said, no, 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 no. You need to invest more and your costs will go down. You invest in quality and your costs will go down. Ah, and people thinking, how does that happen? If I'm investing, that costs money. So how do my costs go down? Well, your external failure costs go down. Your internal failure costs go down. Ah, your inspection costs go down because you're investing in prevention. Ah, remember what I said? You spend $1 in prevention, you can save $10, $20, $100 in external failure. Okay, so this is a Japanese idea that came along over 30 years ago, more. But let's come back to this. Let me remind you again, there's conformance quality and design quality. Remember, conformance, most of you may never have a clue of the conformance quality of the product you buy. Why? Because you don't know what 3 watts is or 4 amps is, and the battery in your phone is 3,000 milliamp hours. What does that mean? I don't know. All you need to know is that your phone stays on for 9 hours. You with me here, okay? All right? Whereas the engineers, they look at the conformance quality, okay? They'll actually test the battery to check, is it 3,200 milliamp hours? Is it 3,300 or 3,100? Ah, but you as a customer, you care about how many hours do I get, okay? Big difference. Conformance, design, okay. Big idea, this is a big idea you need to take away. All right. We can break product quality dimensions down into performance or into their features, that is the attributes of the product, or the reliability, that is the consistency of the product over time, or conformance. Now remember, conformance is something that you may need to know the engineering specifications of. Many of you may never be able to test the top speed of the car you drive, okay? But the engineers know what the top speed is, okay? But there's other things that you can test in the car, like the fuel economy, okay? So you can find that out because you put fuel in and you've got an odometer, so you can figure that out. So there are things customers can figure out some conformance quality, but generally conformance quality is in the domain of the engineers that set up the specifications for the product. Okay. We have durability, serviceability, aesthetics, and perceived quality. So now we're looking at more minute dimensions. So many of you are, for your project, are interviewing a service company, am I right? Okay, all right. What? It's the end of the time. We've got to start again. Is that a break? Okay, you're doing a service company, so we won't spend much time on the product quality dimensions. I want to go to the service quality dimensions because then that will enable you to think about questions with your interviewee. But with durability, serviceability, aesthetics, if you were going to a factory or you're going to a company to ask them about their product, you may want to ask them about, do customers buy your product because of 1, 2, 3, 4, or the previous one, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? But for a restaurant, this is what you're going to be asking. You would be asking questions associated with service quality. That is, are customers coming to your restaurant because of the physical appearance? Are they coming there because of the reliability? In other words, that nasi lemak you had yesterday is going to be the same as the nasi lemak you have next week. Are you with me here? All right? All right. Responsiveness. Do they smile one day and then they smirk at you the next day, or are they responsive with attending to your requests for service? Assurance, the courtesy of employees, their ability to inspire trust. I remember there was a coffee shop I went to, I will not say which one it is, in Geo Avenue, and when I was sitting down with my wife and we were having coffee and we ordered the egg and avocado on toast, and I could see that at one stage one of the people behind the counter was playing with his smartphone, and then the next stage the same hand is hanging on to my toast and spreading it with the same hand he was holding the smartphone with. And I looked at my wife and I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to eat this. Okay, all right. They should have gloves on, all right? But again, all right, its ability to inspire trust, okay? All right, so service reliability, responsiveness, there's things in here that are very important, okay? So when you go and interview your restaurant, when you talk to your company for your project, asking why customers come to you, maybe they come for 1 but not 2. Maybe they come for 3 but not 4. You're with me here, okay? So the best way to understand these dimensions is it's an answer to that big why question I gave you 6 weeks ago. Remember, why do customers come to you? Well, the answers could be under one of these 5 areas. You with me here? Okay, so we're closing the loop here. Because 6 weeks ago I said, why? That is the big question you need to ask, right? So you can classify that response into those 5 areas, okay? And you can, for the product, for a company making a product, you can classify the why into these 8 areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. So now you can see closure on what we're doing here in these 4 weeks. Okay, now we're going to have a break soon, but when you come back from the break, what I'm going to ask you to think about, what we're going to do is we're going to create a report where we actually put accounting numbers into prevention, appraisal, internal failure costs, and external failure costs. Because what I've shown you earlier on are different parts of the factory where, okay, if they want to prevent something from happening, then they will have documentation. They will have an anti-static wristband. They will have finger gloves on the person that is touching the final product, so then their moisture doesn't get onto that product. They are all prevention activities. And so what about appraisal? Basically, it's about making sure that it's more inspection, it's about checking the product, it's investing in supervising the product. Okay, you with me here, all right? So when I talk to buyers at global sourcing conferences, and by the way, I'm speaking to one this Saturday coming in Hong Kong, I teach them about hiring inspectors. You need to hire inspectors to visit the factory. Do not buy from a factory and put on Amazon for your sales without having the product inspected. You have huge risk. You have huge risk in external failure, you could be closed down. You could go bankrupt. Very easy. Okay, so I talk about that, and that's another topic for another day. Okay, so it's 9 o'clock. Let's have a break for 5 minutes. When we come back, what I'm going to do is to show you how to put numbers into 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to create a report, and the second part of, let's do that. We've got another lecture this afternoon, am I right? Okay, then this afternoon I'm going to show you another exercise where we actually use that information to justify to a CFO or a CEO, should we invest in machine A or invest in machine B? And this is the scenario for each. And it's not like you give it to the CFO or the CIO to figure out what they should do. No, you do it to justify the decision you want them to make. In other words, Mr. CFO, I've done all the calculations. Here's scenario A, here's scenario B. I want to go with scenario A. Here's all my calculations. And if they trust you, they'll say, okay, go ahead. Are you with me here? You don't go to the CFO or the CIO. Here's scenario A, here's B. Which one should we do? No. You don't ask the people above you which one you should do. Okay? You're the one that's working in production. You're the one who knows which one is likely to be the one to be used. Okay. More about that this afternoon. Okay. So let's have a break now for 7 minutes.